Welcome back to the Property Investing Roadmap podcast.
An investment in knowledge always pays the best dividends.
My advice is consider the long term, the medium and the now.
I'm your host, Damian Collins, here to help you navigate the twists and turns of property investing.
If you're wanting to snap up those opportunities in a competitive market, you need to be on the ball and be ready.
The first part is start early.
What's your goal in investing?
In Season 2, we're shifting gears to accelerate your journey through 9 key steps to financial freedom. From research and strategy to creating a model property portfolio, this is your step-by-step roadmap to building an income from property for life. And we're back again, and I'm delighted today. We're going to be talking about step 6 of our journey through the 9 key steps of building an income from property for life. And this one is about how we add commercial property to our investment portfolios. And it's really critical. And our philosophy is we start with residential as an investment, but we finish with commercial investment. So we'll talk a bit about that today. And look, you can get into commercial property for as little as $25,000. A lot of people think you have to be a multi-millionaire, but there are ways you can get into commercial property for a lot less. Today, I'm delighted to have Brad Dunn back from Season 1. Now, Brad is the Head of Key Relationships at Westbridge Funds Management. And Brad will help us dive into this topic today. Now, Brad speaks to lots of clients and he knows what they're looking for and what piques their interest in property investing. So welcome, Brad.
Damian, thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it. It's great.
Look, lots to talk about today, Brad, but I wanted to firstly, before we get into commercial property funds and the pros and cons, and there are both pros and cons of investing in a fund, let's talk about your commercial property investment journey. Tell me your own personal experience with commercial property investment.
Oh, interesting. You probably don't even know this one. I actually, a long time ago, prior to my Westbridge days, looked into buying commercial property direct myself. I got quite a way the way through, actually. I guess really quickly, started off with seeing a lot of my clients back in the banking days. They had a portfolio of commercial property. Did a lot of research into it. You don't have to, you got longer leases, don't have to pay the outgoings, they pay for it all. They look after the property. It looked like a real win. And the best thing was I thought, all right, there's a lot of books telling me I can build my wealth through that and borrow more and more. Anyway, got fast-tracked through, researched it, got pre-approval in place, looked at a few smaller shopping centre style strip mall sort of stuff along in East Vic Park. Got all out there and checked out this place 3 or 4 times and had a little mum and dad sort of investment business in it. Came back the next day, ready to sign the offer on the dotted line, and sure enough, the business next door, the fish and chip shop, had gone under. Scared the out of me, and so instead just bought another residential investment property back then.
And that is one of the, and we'll talk about that today, about the pros and cons of commercial property. Look, there are a lot of great advantages, but that is one of the key challenges when you have a tenant can go broke and not always easy to replace. I'll share with the audience as well one of my horror stories of a 2-year vacancy on one property. So we'll talk about that today, and we'll talk about obviously your role, and we'll talk about the property funds and how investors can do that. So, what do you see as some of the reasons why investors choose to invest in a property fund rather than a direct commercial property?
Some of the reasons. Going back to my example, straight off the bat, they see value in commercial property. They understand that there's so many benefits to it, but throwing a lot of money into just one property and putting so much of your eggs into that one basket can be quite daunting. So with those managed funds, or the property funds as we call them, you can put, as you said, as little as $25,000 into some of these products and diversify your risk and get much better quality properties from it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons I see investors wanting to invest in a fund is the fact that they don't have to commit such a large chunk of money. And look, people are more comfortable investing big lumps of money in residential. I think they feel it's safer and more secure. But people feel, rightly a bit nervous about investing $2, $3, $5, $10 million if they've even got that. It's out of reach for a lot of people into one single asset, which might have one single tenant. But it's also the not just concentration risk, it's the ability to diversify across multiple funds. And I know, but to Westbridge, I think the average client's invested nearly 4 times, which is great. But what do you see clients doing in terms of their asset allocation across various property funds? Do they sort of like to spread it around?
Oh, definitely. And if they're not, whilst I can't provide personal sort of comments. Often if I see an investor who's got zero commercial funds and experienced a lot of residential, they sell a residential property, they've all of a sudden come into some money, they go, right, I want to throw 500,000 into this one fund. I'd be like, look, great, but I wouldn't recommend it. I'd recommend there's always other funds, there's always other options. Spread your risk. Like I personally, I'm in 6 or 7 of these things, and I'm quite happy to say there's like 35 odd properties that are, that I've got a piece of now. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and as you say, we can't give personal advice, but someone wants to think about that. Again, putting all their eggs in one basket, particularly if it's a single asset property fund, or why do 500,000? If you've got millions, that's a different story. 500,000 is a reasonable amount of money to go into one. But if you've only got, that's all you've got, rather than one fund for 500,000, you might go 5 funds at 100,000 each, and certainly helps people sleep better at night because you're not relying on just one tenant or one particular asset class to go well. But
it's important as well. I do find that it also comes down to your timing as well. So I'm sure you'll be asking this eventually, but one of the big points that a lot of investors, they diversify is also because they don't want to get to the end of a fund and have this huge capital gains bill come out of them all in one hit in that same point of time. Whereas if you're staggering your investments and you go, well, this one will finish in 2027, this one will in 2028, they're reducing their tax bill over the years. And so by that forward planning, it's not just diversification, it's being smart with your money.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, and you can talk it through for us, Brad, the fact that a lot of our clients set themselves up financially. They don't want to get into retirement and have to self-manage all these assets. A lot of them like to go caravanning and flying overseas. Tell us about that and some of the stories from the investors about, why in a fund, at least they're getting professional management of those assets.
So how many would you like? Just
one or two. We're limited for time.
Just this morning, I was talking to an investor who's just decided on a whim, because he can. He's got his sons now working down on a winery down in Margaret River and managed to get a tiny little plot of land there. So he's using the excuse to get his caravan down there and just spend 3 weeks down at the actual winery. His son's going to bring the food over to his caravan each night, and he gets to basically travel around and do all that. He doesn't have time and doesn't have the care factor to be doing it. He recently sold a commercial property that he originally had. So it's not like he hasn't bought commercial property in the past. He just sees it as a risk versus reward thing, right? Like I could get a couple of % more, but I have to manage it myself. I have to worry about the tenants. If something goes wrong, I have to manage it. I have to look after it. Instead, I've got a professional team that's going to do it for me, and I can go spend time with my son down in Margaret River.
And look, that's the issue. I do have some direct commercial property from many, many years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago. There's some pros and cons of that, but look, I've got one now that's coming out vacant again. The tenant is leaving at the end of the lease, and that asset sat vacant at one stage for 2 years. Now, if that had been the sole asset I owned as an investment property, that would have been very, very painful. Now, fortunately, it was one asset within a much wider pool of assets that I had. So it was the diversification was there on that basis. And it's just, dealing with tenant issues, it can be a lot of headaches. Even though I've got property managers in and leasing agents who do all that work, it certainly does still mean that I have to make decisions. And one of the beauties of a fund is the fund manager makes those decisions. Brad, tell us some of the examples of what sort of property funds are out there and the types of properties that people can get access to.
Okay, sure. I guess you can bundle them into different groups because there is quite a wide range. You can go, sort of your income-focused funds, which are predominantly looking at, nice long incomes, generally long leases. Then you've got your balanced sort of ones that target that blend of both income and capital growth. And then you've got your growth-focused ones or value-add ones as well, which might have slightly less on the income side or even no income in some cases, and all focused on that capital growth and capital return. So it depends what you're looking for in a fund, and that's probably the biggest piece of information I'd be saying to someone first is work out what you want in a fund before you go looking at just a specific product.
And not only that, though, within that fund, you talk about income-focused fund. It could be industrial property, it could be retail property, it could be office, could be diversified across multiple assets and sectors. And, just tell us about some of those.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a huge range. Some of my favourites might be, for example, a single asset I would say, value add fund, which has some great income, but also potential to improve that capital growth. And that's the Welsh Pool Fund. It's a big industrial property. It's 55,000 square metres right along Orring Road, right on the main sort of strip there in the Welsh Pool, which is one of the prime sort of industrial locations here in WA. It's got, I think it's 11 separate tenancies in there, like Kennard's Hire, Bridgestone, Chicken Treat, MMA Offshore, the list goes on. But the other part, and the part that I really love about it, it's got vacant land, which I know the fund has since recently just built a nice big 3,000 square metre shed on there to include extra tenants in. It's got more value add opportunities going through. So not only are you getting that regular income on the way through, but then you're getting the uplift of that capital growth, getting sort of extra special distributions paid on the way through. And when you sell the profit at the end, you get an even bigger uplift. So it's a great little fund there.
Yeah.
Some other examples might be like our diversified funds, where, as you said, you've got big quality ASX or global listed tenancies like your Blackwoods and your Woolworths and big names. You got key locations around Australia. You're diversifying between medical and industrial and large format retail shopping centres. It's a really good way to spread your risk, and in one fund you're getting access to multiple big quality tenants and big quality assets.
And one of those diversified funds has produced 17% per annum return over the long run, so which has been a fantastic outcome. Now, of course, you can buy property. We spoke about direct property, and we've spoken about funds, and particularly unlisted funds where they're not quoted on the stock market. But there are listed funds as well. Do you want to just give the listeners an example of how listed funds work?
Yeah, sure. I guess both unlisted and listed funds are designed to purchase a property into a fund so the investors can enjoy that benefit of income and capital growth. I guess the difference is listed is on the stock market, so you are subject to the rise and fall of what's happening in the market, sometimes entirely independent of what's happening within the fund. You're generally getting, you're still getting income, but it might be quarterly or 6 monthly. You're not getting that monthly income, which is very important if you're a retiree in a caravan looking for that monthly income to keep your lifestyle going. But I guess on the benefits side, the listed product gives you that liquidity, which is a very big piece. That listed stock allows you to go in at a much smaller price point. How much would you go in? You could put a couple of grand in minus your brokerage costs, and you can get in at a very low base, and you can get out straight away as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So the stock market listed property funds, and there's plenty of them. You get liquidity. You can generally, most of these funds you can sell on the same day. You'd make a decision and you'll get your money within 3 days. Generally, that's how it works. But for the price of liquidity, you are certainly paying in volatility. So these funds can be, even though the underlying value of the assets might be, let's say, $1 per unit, and they are still generally unit trusts on the stock exchange. But even though the value might be $1, that unit price, I've seen them as high as $1.30. I've seen them as low as 65 cents. And so that's the volatility. So you might want to get out, but the market, for whatever reason, is saying, well, it's been sold down to 70 cents, you're not going to get your dollar back. So that's always the risk. And versus an unlisted fund, you don't get that liquidity. Often the fund is potentially for a 7-year term, and you're stuck in that fund generally for 7 years. And that's the price you pay for more stability. And some funds do have potentially some liquidity along the journey. But so I think that's one of the things that people need to be aware of. If you're going to an unlisted fund, make sure you understand when the fund is likely to end and your ability to get money out, because they are generally, like all direct property, long-term investments.
That's probably the most important piece as well that I try and speak to all the investors. The investors call it an illiquidity premium. Quite a lot of them love the fact that it's illiquid, especially if it's going into something like their self-managed super fund or they're going trips around the world, because they don't want to be having to look after their money the whole time. Yeah. They're quite happy to put their money in, know they're going to get a regular income on the way through, and they like that longevity. But with it comes that extra thought process, that longer time frame that they need to think on.
Yeah. Now, what should investors look for when they're choosing a property fund?
Okay, so there's lots to unpack here. I would say first step, though, is take a step back and what's your goal in investing? Before you look at the fund itself, what are you looking for in your investment? Is it income, as we talked about? Is it balanced? Is it shorter term? Is it longer term? Have a look at what you're looking at first before you decide to go into that fund. But then once you're in that fund, there's lots of things to look at. You need to be looking at the fund itself and the strategy. So is it something that is going to be finished in 7 years, in 5 years? And then you need to be looking at the actual assets that are within that fund. Are they assets that are good quality? And you don't need to be an expert here, but you do need to have a basic understanding. If you're buying something in the middle of nowhere, well, you're going to be adding to your risk.
Absolutely.
I guess on top of that too, the tenants are massive. If you've got, mum and dad investor sort of tenancy versus a big Woolworths, I know which one I'd prefer to take the risk on. Woolies are going to be able to keep paying the rent even if the stock market's going down or not.
Yeah.
But I guess all of that, I find a lot of the investors, as they start to get into their journey, the more experienced ones, they spend less time asking questions on the basic fundamentals of a property and more time spent on the fund manager themselves, because they want to know that there's trust and they're going to do what they say they're going to do. They want to know they've got a good track record, that they can do what they say they're going to do as well. And then I guess if something goes wrong, because things can go wrong with commercial property like any investment, and they want to know that that manager has the expertise to be able to work their way through it.
I think that's really important. Anyone who's bought a lot of assets over the journey, no one's perfect, but certainly as we sit here at the moment, the office market is in a pretty ordinary way around the country, and some fund managers back that horse, and a lot of those funds aren't paying any distributions at all. And so I'd go back and look at the asset selection and the quality of assets that the fund has bought, track record, because that'll give you an idea. No one's perfect and no guarantees in the future, but that would certainly give you an idea of their performance and what they've been able to do for their investors.
Yeah. One thing that surprised me as well is the amount of investors that they would see multiple funds and multiple sort of different opportunities pop up almost on a daily basis. And I'll have conversations with the investors and they'll be like, hang on, you've got one that's distributing, it's recommending 9% distributions and we're offering 7%. And every single time I go, yeah, but if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. We're looking at that and we're going, that shouldn't be 9%. And so they're looking at that risk versus return, and they're opting in for something that's more stable, that's going to allow them to sleep at night, allow them to go on their holidays and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, and that's it. Generally, risk and return, the higher the promised return, generally that does mean a higher risk, doesn't it? So what are some of the main risks that investors need to consider when they're going into a property fund?
Well, straight off the bat, the property is the big one, right? So, is it in a good location? Is it got good population growth happening in around it? Is it a core location where the tenant is going to be able to get business? These are businesses that are in these commercial properties, not residential. So the property is the first main one I would suggest. And with that, of course, then the second big one's the tenant. Like if you've got a good quality tenant that can ride the waves and manage their business well, they're going to look after your property as well.
Just on that topic, I was speaking to somebody this morning about an asset that's owned by a particular fund, and it's a health asset. And health assets, everyone's excited about, I want to get into the medical health. But it's a hospital. It's a very specialised asset. And that now I've been told that tenant can't pay the bills and are not paying the bills. So you've got an asset that is very specialised, and if that tenant goes out of business, you've got to get a very specialised operator to come back in. That may or may not happen. So and it's not easily repurposed. So there are all the things that you need to be thinking about. Like when we buy industrial assets, we certainly look, you want to get a great tenant, but anything's possible in this world. So what happens if that tenant is not there? Can somebody else use that property? And that's really some of the things that go into choosing an asset.
I think it all comes back to as well, the good investors spend less time asking me about those sort of basics within a property and more time asking about the track record, about the person behind the scenes, because like with anything, right, you surround yourself with experts who know what they're talking about. The amount of investors that come to me on an asset and go, oh, is that property on a floodplain? Did that flood once in 100 years? Have you got insurance to cover that? Oh, hang on. I drove past the property and there was a bit of rust on the bottom right-hand corner of the 55,000 square metre property.
That's seriously looking at the asset.
Yeah. The good investors don't ask any of that. They build trust with the funds manager. They look at the track record. Over time, they build that communication, right? They know that the person is an expert and they're going to do what they say they're going to do. They don't worry about asking about those questions.
Yeah. And I think that's just important to ask the manager about their risk management strategy. So how do they, we're always looking at risk, and there's always risks. So how do we minimise those? You can't always eliminate those, but it's about risk management, and it's quality of the tenant, the length of the leases, all those sorts of things go into it. And I think that's something that any investor should be thinking about before they go into a particular property fund. Now, how do fees work? Of course, everybody's got to get paid, Brad. So typically, what sort of fees are involved in a property fund?
Is generally they're bundled in different bases. So you've got an acquisition fee, because that's when a lot of the cost is spent for the company to try and find an asset. A lot of people don't realise you're probably looking at 1,500 properties a year and only buying 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah.
So the acquisition fee is the big one. Then you've got an ongoing management fee. So you're looking after the properties themselves, the fund strategy, everything. So there's generally like a monthly fee that comes through with that. You generally have a sales fee as well. Quite often people don't realise, but there is costs in selling the asset. You've got agents and that need to be fed. So those fees aren't going directly back, but they are part of the fees. And then finally, if they're any good, there's generally a performance fee, and it's based around performing above what you say you're going to do. So they'll take a certain percentage. You win if they win.
Yeah, exactly. Look, that's pretty standard. There is a buying fee at the beginning. There's an asset management fee to look after the money, make sure investors get paid, all those sort of things. There's also at the back end. So generally at the back end there is potentially a sales fee, which could often go to the selling agents, and a performance fee. So all these fees will be in any disclosure document, whether it's an information memorandum or a product disclosure statement. So please just always read that. Make sure that the fees, whatever one you're investing in, you're comfortable with, and ultimately someone's got to get paid to manage those assets, but just make sure that they're fair and reasonable. I think that's just an important thing.
Agree, and I think it's also very important, because whilst I would suggest most of them are the case, just be aware that all those fees should be net of what they're saying. So if they're saying the distribution is 6.5%, that should be after all the fees that have already come out.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not during. So.
Absolutely. And just so the other thing we haven't touched on is the debt in the property fund. So most property funds will carry debt. It's generally, depending on the fund, unlisted funds generally sort of carry 50 to 55% on average of debt. How does that work for the investor in terms of what impact does that have potentially on their returns, and also what is there any liability for investors for the debt in that fund?
Yeah, both good points. First one I'll touch on is it says generally 50 to 55% of the asset value. Now, the reason we do that, and the reason that there is debt, is because if you had a $10 million property with 10 million investors in it, it's 10 million investors that need to have a certain percentage of income coming back, and they're not going to be able to get as much. Whereas if you've only got 5 million investors and 5 million debt, that debt cost is lower than what the investors should be getting. And so therefore there's less investors, less mouths to feed. Those investors share in a better portion of it. Yeah. I guess the second part then is what's called non-recourse debt. So in all these funds, in the unit trust setup, whilst the investors are unit holders and they own a piece of that property, they don't get into trouble with the debt. So the debt would only be able to be taken if something went wrong away from the asset. You wouldn't be any recourse back to the investor should there any be issues.
Yeah, so the investor's not personally liable for the debt. It's the asset in the fund. And look, debt and gearing has got pros and cons. And if you're able to borrow, it depends on what the interest rates are, but if you're able to borrow at 5.5%, for example, and buy an asset that gives you 7% return, well, that's positively geared and means investors can get a better return. If the capital growth is there, well, if it's 50% geared, then investors are effectively getting twice the value of the growth, because they're only the capital is 50%, the debt is 50%. So an asset, simple example, if an asset's worth 10 million and you've got 5 million of capital, that asset goes to 20 mil, it's doubled, but the investor's capital has gone from 5 mil to 15 mil, so they've tripled. But it does work on the downside. So you just need to be careful about the assets. Make sure the assets are ones that are likely to go up. No guarantees, but if it does go back the other way, that's obviously a problematic for investors. And we have, unfortunately, out there, any property carries risk. Certainly that can happen.
Yeah, definitely. I guess another piece of that, and with the cash flow side of things, when you've got the interest rates As people think of it as, like your own little business. The unit trust has got your rental income coming in, your expenses go out, and the biggest expense is always the interest costs. So if you believe interest rates are coming down, well, there's more cash flow coming into that fund, which can help out. But likewise, if interest rates go up, there's less cash flow, which means distributions may need to drop.
Yeah.
One piece to then think on is the leases that are in place with those tenants that are paying that rental income, well, have they got increases built in every single year to compensate for any interest rate movements?
Yeah, and we did see that, obviously, from the early 2000s COVID, when interest rates were very, very low. What the good old days that was, when you could get a home loan for 3% or less, and commercial loans we used to get for 1.6% or 1.5%. The good old days, that's long gone. But interest rates certainly can impact and do impact the total returns that you're going to get, particularly around yield. So, look, Brad, what's your top piece of advice for investors considering property funds?
Yeah, look, pick up the phone, ask as many questions as you need, get your head around it, get your understanding. Secondly, think longer, right? Too many investors see a product, see an opportunity, and they jump.
Yep.
They're not thinking about their overall portfolio, and once again, can't talk to individual circumstances, but have you got cash put aside? Because this is an illiquid investment. Likewise, what is your time frame? In 7 years' time, are you looking to retire? Oh, look, I'm going into a 7-year fund. That works out really well. Myself personally, I've got kids that are going to be old enough to buy a car in 5 years, so I made sure I had funds that I went in that are going to be coming out in 5 years' time, so I can help my son out with buying a car.
Hope he drives better than you, Brad. So, look, thanks for that. And look, that is really important. That if you've got any questions, you should be able to call that fund manager, and someone should be on the end of that line willing to take your call, not just send you out documents to fill in and send money back. So keep that in mind. If you're investing in a fund, are they willing to take your call and chat to you about the investment products that they have?
Communication is so important. Yeah. I'd also add to that, only because I was speaking to this investor just this morning. Spend the time is the second big piece. Too many investors look at it, they leave it on the kitchen bench, they forget about it. I've got this lovely couple that every single Friday, the husband and the wife for the past 15 years, they sit down to a cooked breakfast, and while they're eating their breakfast, they run through every single one of their funds, just a quick update, where's it at, what's happening, when does it expire. I often get a phone call on that Friday morning just to be included in their breakfast from afar, because they're over in Queensland, and just have a good chat with them. But they spend the time, they communicate with each other, they're on the same page. They didn't want to wait until they were 70 to retire, so they put the time in. So don't get focused on your day-to-day, taking the kids to school and worrying about all that stuff, because, whilst you need to do it, you need to find time to build your wealth now so that you can retire and go on those trips and do what you want to do.
And that's ultimately why we're all investing, right, is to give us that lifestyle, whether that's at 40, 50, 60, 70, whatever that is, it's that lifestyle that's going to give us. And that's why we're all investing generally for that reason, or it might be to pass on something to the kids or buy them a car, Brad. So thanks again for joining us, Brad. Look, I just want to wrap up with a final tip. Commercial property isn't just for the big players anymore. Many, many years ago, really the only way you could access it, commercial property, was if you had super funds that invested in that space. But now a lot of people have direct choice with self-managed super funds or direct investment. You can get access to some fantastic assets, fantastic tenants that you previously, 30 years ago, you couldn't do. And commercial property can provide great income streams. It does provide tax benefits, and all without the headache of direct ownership. But the key is you've got to understand the risks involved in these types of investments, understand the fund manager, what their track record is, and how good they are and how likely they are to get you good returns in the future. Obviously, of course, nothing is guaranteed. Thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to rate us to help others discover the show. Please note that the information shared on Property Investing Roadmap is general in nature and doesn't take into account your individual circumstances. The information is for educational purposes only and should not be relied on for investment or financial decisions. Always seek professional advice before deciding whether to invest. Always read the PDS, TMD, or information memorandum when considering financial products. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. Today's guests are representatives of Westbridge Funds Proprietary Limited, AFSL 533936, and Westbridge Property Securities Limited, AFSL 238386. please refer to the terms and conditions at westbridgefunds.com.au.